thanks all for coming here tonight. I mean, the referendum coming up is one of the most important we've ever faced. And actually, it's connected to my mind with any possible abortion referendum. If we lose this badly, I think they will have an abortion referendum in 2017. If we keep this close, or we manage to win, it'll frighten them off an abortion referendum for years to come. So I think actually this is connected to protecting the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, which is the pro-life amendments. So the two issues are linked. If they can beat us badly on marriage, they'll figure they can also beat us on the abortion issue. So this is really an important battle, not just for what marriage and the family is all about, but for the pro-life section of the Constitution too. Now, what's at stake here? An awful lot of people around the country at the moment who are inclined to vote yes are asking themselves, oh sure, what's the harm? If two nice fellas who love each other get married, how does that affect me? What's the harm? What else does it affect? And they can't think of what else it affects, so they're inclined to vote yes. Now that yes support is actually quite soft. A lot of the opinion polling has shown it's soft. So there is still a battle to be fought, and it's a battle we can win if we can persuade enough people. Actually, there are consequences that haven't been thought of yet, that haven't been flagged to people, because as we know, our media are just almost completely on the side of the yes campaign. And we're essentially hearing propaganda all the time. Marriage equality, yes to equality, yes to love, equal love, all these sort of mantras and sound bites the whole time. And I mean, I go on a few programs here and there, but it doesn't compare to very soft interviews with gay rights campaigners on the Late Late Show, or the Saturday Night Show, or the John Murray Show, or the Ray Darcy Show, or whatever the case may be. So it's just been almost uninterrupted propaganda for years, and it's intensifying at the moment, because they're trying to get as big a lead as they possibly can before the referendum proper begins towards the end of this month. Now, I'll get into the substance of the issue in a moment, but I mean, there's a lot of heart to be taken from this fact. There's been many referendum campaigns in which the position favoured by what we call official Ireland and Dublin has started out way ahead and has lost. So there's been EU treaty referendums where the pro-EU side has started off massively in front and has lost. There was the recent Shannon referendum, started out way in front and lost. The Oireachtas Inquiries referendum started way in front and lost. And the Children's Rights referendum of 2012, I think it was, the end of 2012, with 4 weeks to go, the yes side and it was on 74%, and the no side was on 4%. There was practically no side to speak of. It was John Waters and Cathy Sinan and a few other people. The no side in the Children's Rights campaign spent something like €18,000. The yes side spent over $1 million, and had all the media on their side. And yet on the day itself, within a space of 4 weeks, the no side went from 4% to 42%. Now, if that can be done, we can do it in this referendum, but we can do better, because a lot more people are energised to support the no side this time than last time. And so don't be depressed by the opinion polls. There's been a number of referendums on this around the world, most of them in America. There's been about 35 state referendums in America, including in very liberal states like California. And our position has won 33 out of 35 referendum campaigns in America. There's been 2 referendums in Europe, one in Slovenia 3 years ago and one in Croatia, and both times our side won. And in Slovenia, with only 10% church attendance, this is 3 years ago, the yes side was consistently on 60 to 70% support. They had all the money, all the media, all the politicians, and on the day itself, they lost. That is, the other side lost, 55-45. Even though opinion polls with 3 days to go were showing the pro-gay marriage side on 60% support. And actually, our side thought they had lost. They thought they had no hope of winning, but on the day itself, they won. So something switches in people's minds when they actually begin to hear about the issues. And that's our task, to make them hear about the issues. Now, let's get into the substance. What are we changing? We're changing the section of the Constitution, Article 41, that is called the family. It's not called marriage, it's called the family. Marriage is mentioned in this section. What Article 41 says is, it begins like this: the family is the natural, primary and fundamental group unit of society. That is, the family is the natural, primary and fundamental group unit of society and is founded on marriage. And even though it doesn't define marriage in the Constitution, marriage has always been understood to mean marriage of a man and a woman. So it's saying the family is founded on a man and a woman. And how can it be any other way? Because only a man and a woman can produce a child. So the union of a man and a woman is absolutely fundamental, primary and natural to society. If men and women do not form unions, we have no society eventually. So it's quite clear that what is at stake here is a vision of the family that is just rooted in reality. The union of a man and a woman is vital to society. The union of a man and a woman is different from any other kind of union that people can form. Now, if we switch over and allow same-sex marriage, what we're saying is the marriage of two men or the marriage of two women is just as fundamental, natural and primary to society as the marriage of a man and a woman, even though the union of two men or two women can never ever produce a child. Now we know there's some married couples who can't have children, but the union of two men or two women can never ever produce a child and can never ever give a child a mother and a father. The right to marry in our Constitution comes with the right to found a family, and that means with the right to have children. When you give somebody a right to marry, now you can't stop people having children if they want to, and they're not married and they want to have children, they're going to have children. But there's a legally recognised right to have children when you marry under our Constitution. So when you are giving the right to marry, you are giving the right to have children also. So when you're giving the right to two men to marry, you're also giving them the right to have children. You're giving two women the right to have children. Now when you give two men the right to have a child, what is missing from the child's life?
Mother.
Precisely. And then conversely, if you give two women the right to have a child, what's missing from that child's life?
Father.
A father. Now this is simply the most basic facts of life. It's literally baby stuff in every possible sense of that word, because it is completely simple to understand and it is literally about babies, and it's about mothers and fathers, and it's about the birds and the bees. So when we talk about giving people rights, you've got to consider, will anybody else's rights be affected adversely by that? Will anybody else's rights be harmed and taken away? You see, people often say this is like giving the right of a black person to marry a white person, because in certain American states and in South Africa interracial marriage was banned, and they try to compare this to that. Or they try to say it's like the American South where they had segregation, or South Africa where they had apartheid. But when blacks were given equal rights, nobody else's rights were affected. So it was completely fair and acceptable and defensible. Because nobody, when a black person could sit anywhere they liked on the bus, or use any drink fountain, or go to any school, or get married to who they liked, nobody else's rights were affected, least of all the rights of children. But if you give two men the right to have a child, which comes with the right to marry, or two women the right to have a child, which comes with the right to marry, it affects the rights of children. Because if we believe a child ought to have a mother and a father, we cannot possibly countenance same-sex marriage. Just can't do it. And the government knows perfectly well that this is what's going on. The government knows perfectly well that they're changing the article called the family. We are redefining the family. We are kicking out of our law the notion that a child ought to have a mother and a father. Because what is recognised by our Constitution at the moment is the family of man, woman and child. And we know that not all married couples have children, but we also know that every child has a mother and a father, and that's much more fundamental. And even if a given man and woman can't have a child, if they adopt, let's say, they can still give the child a mother and father. So what we're really saying in our Constitution right now is the family is founded on the union of a man and a woman, and if a man and a woman get married and they have a child, that child will have a married mother and father who are committed to their welfare. That's what we're saying. It is simply a recognition of basic facts of life. Now, I believe in calling different things by different names. The union of a man and a woman is clearly different from the union of a man and a man and should be given a different name. I mean, a bike and a car are two modes of transport, but you give them different names so you know you can distinguish between the two different things. So even if we allow same-sex marriage, it will remain a fact that the union of a man and a woman will still be different and should be called something different. So what's going on here actually is we are being asked to pretend that two different things are the same. We're being asked to pretend that the union of two men or two women is the same as the union of a man and a woman, when they're clearly not the same. And this is why using words like equality is completely misleading. Because when we're talking about equality, what we mean is you treat similar situations in similar ways, but you treat different situations differently. And because the union of a man and a woman is unique in kind, it makes perfect sense to treat it uniquely, and it's not discrimination not to treat it uniquely. Now, there's this thing called the Children and Family Relationship Bill. How many people here would say they know much about it? The Children and Family Relationship Bill was passed into law, and I think it may have been signed by President Higgins in the last few days. It was passed through the Oireachtas in a matter of weeks with almost no debate whatsoever. It is the most radical and far-reaching piece of family law reform in the history of the state. That's how Enda Kenny described it, and he's right about that. It is the most radical piece of family law reform in the history of the state. What it basically does is, it says, from the point of view of a child, whether the parents are married or not is not the tiniest bit important. Whether the child is related to the parents or not is not in the tiniest bit important. Whether the child is raised by a mother and father or not, or one woman or one man, or two women or two men, is not important. What this piece of family law reform basically says is, so long as the child is loved, that is all that matters. Can you all hear me at the back, by the way? Okay. Basically what it allows is this, for example, when it comes to adoption. A gay couple or a cohabiting heterosexual couple have the same right to adopt as a married man and woman. Now, if you give two men the same right to adopt a child, or to apply to adopt a child, as a married man and woman, what are you saying about the value of motherhood and fatherhood in the child's life? Because what you're saying is, when the adoption authorities are considering which couple should adopt a child, and I mean, let's put you through a scenario. Let's say there's one child who's been placed for adoption, and we say there's two couples who are ready to adopt that child, and we say they've passed the whole assessment process. One couple consists of a loving lesbian couple, two loving mothers. The other couple comprises a loving mother and father. Who should the child go to? I mean, most people would agree with this, but the government doesn't. The government thinks it's a toss of a coin, basically, because there's no difference between men and women. There's no difference between mothers and fathers when it comes to the raising of children. That the love of a mother is not unique and irreplaceable. The love of a father is not unique and irreplaceable. Two women can be just the same as a mother and father. Two men can be just the same as a mother and father. This actually says mothers are the same as fathers. It says men are the same as women. This is nuts. I mean, like, remember, the same-sex marriage movement tells us celebrate difference, but then tells us to deny the difference between men and women and mothers and fathers. So this is what they're asking us to do. They're asking us to deny difference. And the only way they can use the word equality is if they make us fall under the pretense that men are not different from women, and men and women are not complementary. Now consider this fact. We get told all the time about gender quotas. We get told all the time how vital it is as an equal number of men and women in politics, and an equal number of men and women in the boards of businesses and companies. Now, why is it vital to have an equal number of men and women in politics, and an equal number of men and women on the boards of companies, but not an equal number of men and women when it comes to the raising of children? Because the only reason we're male and female is because that is how we reproduce. That's the only reason we have two sexes, is because that's how we bring children into being. And this is the one area of life where we're now being told that the difference between the sexes is not important. The very reason we have two sexes, which is to do with children, we are now told not a bit important when it comes to children, but vitally important when it comes to politics and business. Now, how does that make any sense at all?
Not.
And I often put it to people on programs. I put it to the likes of Ivana Bacik. All right? How can you be in favour of an equal number of men and women in politics, but not an equal number of men and women raising children together? Never an answer for that. Never. Because there is no answer to it. You cannot possibly justify thinking the sexes are bring complementary things to business and politics and not complementary things to the raising of children. It simply makes no sense. So actually, what we're being asked to do if we endorse same-sex marriage and change the definition of marriage and the family, we are being asked not to vote for equality. We are being asked to pretend that the sexes are the same. We're being asked to pretend that men and women are the same and mothers and fathers are the same and are completely interchangeable. That's what we're being asked to do. And only a country that either has been fooled into thinking that what's been asked is different to what really has been asked, or people who have gone so far down the politically correct rabbit hole that they don't know which end is up anymore can possibly vote yes to this. I mean, I really hope the Irish people have not become so adrift of common sense that they actually don't believe that a child deserves a mother and father anymore. Now, what I often get told is, David Quinn, you're not living in the real world. Lots of children are not being raised by the mother and father anymore. Lots of children are being raised without a father, or whatever the case may be. And we must face this reality. Now, this is true, but there's a world of difference between circumstance and design. There's a world of difference between a child losing a father because the father has died, or the mother has died, or the mother has walked out, or the father has walked out. That's circumstance. And there's not a whole lot we can do in most cases about circumstance. But what we're being asked to do is endorse children who are made deliberately motherless or deliberately fatherless through the likes of adoption policy or through the likes of the use of surrogate mothers and IVF. Because really, if two men want to exercise the right they would have under Article 41 to have a child and they can't adopt, what's the other way they're going to be able to have a child? They're going to have to find some woman to give them their womb, and they're going to have to get an egg off another woman. Now, this is called an egg donation, but it's really purchasing an egg, because what you do is you go to a catalogue from a fertility clinic and you go through the catalogue and you see, well, this hair colour, this eye colour, this level of education, this ethnic group, etc. And you say, that looks like a good match, so we buy this egg at probably the cost of thousands. But your problem hasn't stopped there, because guess what? Neither man is going to have a womb. So what happens? They have to go and find some woman who's going to give them their womb for 9 months. And if they manage to overcome that obstacle, if that particular fact of life doesn't, get in the way, and they find somebody to give the womb. You see, the thing is, you can't avoid sexual complementarity at the end of the day, can you? I mean, if two men are going to have a child, they still need to find a woman. If two women are going to have a child, they still need to find a man. Now, it might be that they buy some kind of sperm, or they buy some woman's egg, or they effectively rent some woman's womb, but you can't get around sexual complementarity. But the curious thing is, we're being asked to believe this doesn't matter to the definition of marriage and the family. And it's simply insane. But this is the vision of the family that our government is completely and utterly bought into, with no public debate at all. None. Frances Fitzgerald, scandalously, she's the minister responsible for this bill, Alan Shatter before her. She was asked no tough questions about this bill by any journalist that I'm aware of whatsoever. None. So we had a debate about the water charges, right and proper. But we had no debate about something much more important, children's rights in the shape of the family. Now, the Children and Family Relations Bill, what else is going to allow? I mean, this gets away just from the issue of gay marriage. If you want a child, I mean, first of all, by the way, about 90% of couples who use the likes of IVF, and there's still problems with IVF because you end up getting spare embryos created and destroyed and what have you. But let's leave aside that very important fact for the moment. 90% of couples who use IVF use their own egg, their own sperm and their own womb. So it is biologically their child in every single way. But a certain minority use somebody else's egg, somebody else's sperm, and sometimes somebody else's womb. Now, if you have a child, if two men do say have a child and they're using somebody else's egg, there's two things actually. First of all, the child has no mother in his life. Has a mother, obviously, whoever's the egg donor. And the second mother is actually the surrogate mother, the birth mother. Because what surrogacy does actually is splits motherhood in two. Two women are the mothers, are the natural mothers. The birth mother and the genetic mother who gave the egg. I saw in an article today in one of the English papers, it was describing a surrogacy situation, and so the child is told, I'm mummy, and that's tummy mummy. Are you with me? Yes, they're both mummy. But one is tummy mummy, and the other is mummy because she gave the egg, and she's raising the child. But anyway, so if a child has been raised by two women and there's no father, something else has happened. Not only is there no father in the child's life, then the tie of flesh and blood to one parent has been cut on purpose. Now I have 2 adopted children, but at least I can tell my children, I didn't cut you from your family tree on purpose. That had already happened. But here they're cutting them off their family tree on purpose. And then they're grafting them onto somebody else's family tree. Now adoption steps in where the branch has already fallen off the tree, so to speak, and it has to be put onto somebody else's family tree for the sake of the children. But here it's been severed on purpose. And it's actually a declaration when you do that the family ties don't matter at all. The ties of flesh and blood don't matter at all. Now consider how many Irish names mean son of or daughter of. So many Irish names mean that. In a bigger society, that doesn't have the same meaning they used to have. But so many names in so many languages are saying you're son of or daughter of a particular person. I mean, in Iceland, it's always something daughter or good young son. Nearly every Icelandic name is like that. So this shows the importance of genealogy to people. Programs like Who Do You Think You Are? How is that question answered? When you watch a program like Who Do You Think You Are? How is the question answered? By tracing their family tree, by showing them their genealogy. So you fill in the answer, who do you think you are, by showing them their family tree. Events like the gathering. My mother was from Limerick, so I was at one of these gatherings a couple of years ago in Newcastle West, and there was about 300 of us present. And you're going around the room, you're trying to work out, so you're my third cousin, and how are you my third cousin, and you work it all out. Okay, this is important to people. So what we're doing here with these sciences, with the blessing of the government, is we are deliberately scrambling people's genealogies and deliberately messing around with their family trees. And then we're saying that it doesn't matter. Not important to your life. And yet, programs like Who Do You Think You Are so popular, and The Gathering was popular, all based on genealogy, all based on the ties of flesh and blood. So the Children and Family Relationship Bill is a declaration. Motherhood doesn't matter. Fatherhood doesn't matter because they're interchangeable. Having 2 parents doesn't matter because it also allows a single person to use all these technologies or adopt on the same terms as a married couple. And the ties of flesh and blood don't matter. All you need is love, nothing else. So a mother and father loving a child is no different from 2 men loving a child or 2 women loving a child. Now what they want to say to the likes of me and other people who will campaign against this wretched idea is, I don't know why you're talking about children, David Quinn. That was all taken care of in the Children and Family Relationship Bill. They've already been given all those rights. To which my answer will be twofold. Number 1, you have set out your vision of the family in this bill. You have set out what you think about motherhood and its value. Not valuable. Fatherhood and its value. Not valuable. The ties of flesh and blood. Not valuable. This is your vision of the family. Completely radical, no debate. That's number 1. People need to be aware of just how bad that bill is. So this referendum is actually an opportunity to debate that bill and make people aware of the fast one that's been pulled on the Irish people. It's actually completely undemocratic what has happened. They're putting the legislative horse before the legislative cart before the constitutional horse. They should change the constitutional definition of the family before they go near the legislation, but they've reversed them in order to kind of pull a fast one and say, this is not about children, that's all taken care of. But if we change the constitution, we are copper fastening the new vision of the family that says no special value in a mother's love, no special value in a father's love, no special value in the ties of flesh and blood. Alright? So if we vote for this change that they want to the constitution, we are copper fastening their vision of the family into our constitution, and then there is no going back without a future constitutional referendum. Because okay, so in this Children and Family Bill, they're allowing gay adoption, etc. But once we change the constitution, they will have no choice but to do that. Because if you're saying that 2 married men and 2 married women are exactly the same as a married man and woman, and must be treated exactly the same, it would be impossible for adoption law to make any distinction. If adoption law said, you know what, we're going to seek to place a child with a married man and woman first, because only they can give the child a mother and father, the married men would stand up and say, that's discriminating against us. You can't do that. Our constitutional right to apply to adopt a child is the same as the man and the woman. And the 2 women could say the same thing. So any adoption law that tried to give preference to motherhood and fatherhood would be straight away struck down as repugnant to the Constitution. So let's think. It would be repugnant to the Constitution to attach special value to motherhood and fatherhood. Repugnant to the Constitution to take motherhood and fatherhood as special and important. That's what we'd be voting for. And the government is pretending, and Enda Kenny is pretending, that this is about two words, I do. That's not what it's about. It's about the most radical. You cannot have a more radical definition of the family than the government is proposing. It cannot possibly be more radical. How can they possibly get more radical than saying no special value in a mother's love, no special value in a father's love, no special value in keeping the ties of flesh and blood intact? And I'm saying this is the father of adopted children. All right? This is what we're saying. This is what we're asking us to buy. We can't buy it. We cannot buy it. And we've got to persuade our neighbours. And just think about this, by the way. How many people are scared to say they're no voters?
Yeah, I am.
Absolutely heaps of people. Now, that should be a concern. How have we ever got to a point where it's become controversial to say, I believe that a child ought to have the love of a mother and father? How has it become controversial to say, I believe in motherhood and fatherhood? How has it become controversial to say, I believe in the most natural thing of all, the family of man, woman and child, based on marriage? It's become controversial to say that. That should frighten us. Because actually, for all the talk of tolerance, this is becoming a more intolerant society. Because when a society makes people scared to say they believe in the family of man, woman and child, it's becoming a scary place. Common sense is completely turned on its head. And if the government gets the constitutional change that it wants, it is going to become positively terrifying to say, I believe a child ought to have a married mother and father. And I believe marriage is by definition the union of a man and a woman. And what's it going to do to our freedoms? Northern Ireland doesn't even have same-sex marriage yet. And yet we see this baker being prosecuted by the Northern Ireland state, Ash's Bakery, because they wouldn't bake a cake with a pro-gay marriage slogan on it. They don't even have gay marriage in Northern Ireland. And yet this baker has been prosecuted by the Northern Ireland Equality Commission. Now, down south here, in Dublin, small little stationery shop called Daintree's. And now, it wasn't even the law that came in here. He was serving gay customers who were entering civil partnerships. So he was putting out their ceremony invites. But what he wouldn't do was, he wouldn't put on display a wedding decoration consisting of two grooms. So I don't believe in gay marriage. I don't want it to look like I believe in gay marriage. So his employees dobbed him into the media, dobbed him into the LGBT movement. The next minute there's a youth campaign against him and he's driven out of business. This is about a year ago. Driven out of business because he wouldn't put a wedding cake topper consisting of two grooms on display in a shop. Driven out of business. And then we have now the printer in Drogheda, who didn't want to print out the invites to a civil partnership. Well, actually, and if we pass gay marriage, it might be actually a gay wedding. And they faced possible persecution as well. And this is going to get worse and worse and worse. Enda Kenny said last week in response to a question by Sean O'Rourke that he would expect Catholic schools to teach about same-sex marriage. Now, the Irish Catholic newspaper asked him, well, will those schools have a right, though, to say we don't believe this is a marriage? Because we believe marriage can ever only be between a man and a woman, because that's what a marriage is. It's a sexual union of a man and a woman, and there's nothing else. And the answer that came back from his spokesman was, Christianity is also about tolerance and inclusivity. So does that mean they won't allow Catholic schools, or Protestant schools, or Jewish or Muslim, to teach that marriage can only ever be the union of a man and a woman, and that's what it is by definition, and it can never be anything else? Or will that suddenly in years to come be forbidden? So freedom is at stake. The freedom to believe essentially in common sense is at stake. And then, if we don't go along with this, we're compared to racists. There was a bit of a debate. I was on Morning Ireland the other week with Colin O'Gorman of Amnesty Ireland, and it was about the possibility of a conscience clause being added to any future marriage equality so-called legislation that would protect the baker, protect the stationery shop, protect the printer. No way, not going to be allowed. That would be like giving somebody permission to refuse to serve a black customer. It's not a bit like that. It's not a bit like that. Why? Because is belief in the family of man, woman and child really the same as racism? But that's what they want us to believe, and that's the way, that's what they want society to come to believe, and that's how they want us to be treated. They want those of us who believe in the family of man, woman and child based on marriage. They want us to be treated like racists because they equate that belief with racism. If you believe in the family of man, woman and child, you're like somebody who hates black people and doesn't want to serve them. And they want us to be treated exactly that way. So you can see the massive, massive, massive revolution that's going on here. It won't be enough to bring in same-sex marriage. Opposition will have to be crushed in the same way that racism is crushed. And it will be crushed through social stigma and, where necessary, by force of law. And by certain things being taught in schools and nothing else being taught in schools. So this does not end if we bring in same-sex marriage. This will only be the beginning of it. Because the end game here is to destroy the alternative point of view about the family and about marriage. And is this scaremongering? That's what we're going to be told in the referendum. But it's not scaremongering because we can point to concrete examples that are already happening. A florist in America has been fined $150,000 for not wanting to provide the flowers for a same-sex wedding. $150,000. Indiana, which has brought in an extremely modest, limited religious freedom law, has been attacked by the kind of pro-gay marriage supporters like it's been run by ISIS or the Taliban. Alright? I mean, Tim Cook, the new head of Apple, I won't do business with them anymore because look at their attitude is towards, gay marriage. He's doing business in Saudi Arabia where they execute homosexuals.
He's threatened to pull his operation out of Indiana.
That's correct. I mean, so this is what you're up. This is what you're up against. If a state believes in protecting people who continue to believe in the family of man, woman, and child, it will lose business from a major corporation like Apple.
Where is their freedom then? Where is their freedom then?
Whose freedom?
The people that believe in marriage between a man and a woman and a family, and children coming from a loving relationship of a man and a woman as God meant it to be. Where is their freedom?
Well, that's the point. The freedom is going. And you see, like I said a few minutes ago, are people scared to say they're no voters? And the answer was they are scared. Yeah. It's only going to get worse. You should not be scared to tell your neighbour or your friends or even your family or your sons and daughters, right, that I believe in the family of man, woman and child. And I don't want to see that change in the Constitution. I believe that is the first family. Every family that exists begins with man and woman. Like if it ends up being a single parent family through divorce or whatever, it still began as a man, woman, child family. Every gay family still begins with a man and a woman. Can't exist otherwise. So the first family in every single case for every child is a man and a woman. Now the man and the woman may never have married. They may never even have lived together. But there's still a man and a woman there to start. And when, there's two people of the same sex raising a child, there's always a missing parent. Right? There's either the father or mother missing. So if we're okay with that, vote yes. But if we're not okay with that, vote no. Now, I mean, what's to happen in the next few weeks? I'm going to get Adrian to talk about the campaign and what that will consist of. But what has to happen is people have got to lose the fear of talking to their friends and neighbours and families over the kitchen table. So what would a conversation take the form of? Let's say you're talking to your neighbour over the kitchen table. And you say, how are you going to vote? And they say, well, I'll probably vote yes, so what's the harm? You say, well, actually, that you're changing the definition of the family. That at the moment, what the Constitution believes in is man, woman and child. But if we change the Constitution, we'll be saying man, man and child, or woman, woman and child is just the same. Now, do you really believe that? Do you really believe it's okay to deliberately take away a mother from a child? Or deliberately take away a father from a child in some cases? Like what I get asked sometimes is, David Quinn, all the people who are married today to their wives or husbands will be still married tomorrow. How's it going to affect your marriage? I'm not worried about how it's going to affect my marriage. I'm worried about how it's going to affect the rights of particular children. It's not going to affect the rights of my children. You with children, your children will still have you as their mothers and fathers tomorrow. But a new generation of children will be brought into being who will deliberately have no mother or father, as the case may be. So it's a very selfish point of view to ask yourself, how's it going to affect my marriage? You have to ask, how's it going to affect other people? And then it's going to harm the rights of children. Because we're going to say the natural family doesn't matter. And to labour the point, motherhood and fatherhood doesn't matter. The natural ties don't matter. And the freedom of people to say otherwise and think otherwise must be crushed. Like you're a racist. So that's what's at stake.